Hi, Juliana. Welcome and thank you so much for making the time to be with us today. I know how busy Victorian politicians are at the moment, so we really appreciate you making the time to be with us. Thank you.
Thank you so much for this opportunity, Carol.
Juliana, your background and decision to enter politics, so fascinating. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Well, I certainly grew up in Ballarat, the community I now have the honour of representing, in a large Catholic family. Dad ran a pharmacy in Ballarat and Mum was a physiotherapist. So we weren't a traditional political family in terms of when you look at some of the great families who have come through Victorian Australian politics. But we were a family that discussed politics. The 7 o'clock news was always on. The Age got delivered every morning. News on the hour was always in the car. So there was a lot of discussion about issues and debate. But very much I've been reflecting on this through the Catholic lens. So my mother is a very devout Catholic. So lots of right to life stuff was discussed in our house, which is a position that I don't share with my mother. Euthanasia was another issue. I remember sort of being at a table with my grandparents when I was about 10 and they were talking about the euthanasia and I thought they were talking about China. And very much that's been a debate that we've had in our family about voluntary assisted dying legislation now. And also issues of marriage equality. Obviously that is something that I'm very supportive, as is most people of my generation, but something that my parents really did struggle with. And Dad voted one way and Mum voted the other. So politics was certainly discussed. We watched the federal budget every year. That was always on and we sat around as a family and watched it, which sounds incredibly nerdy. But yeah, so not party political, but certainly an interest in current affairs and world affairs certainly shaped my upbringing.
Yes, so you started your life as a teacher?
Well, no, first of all, after studying at Monash, I then went on to work for the union movement. So I did a very traditional pathway for a ALP member of Parliament. And I worked up in Wollongong in the steel industry, undertaking the ACTU Organising Works program. And I was an elected official for the AW Port Kembla branch, which was incredible. I was the first woman elected ever to a position in the AW in Port Kembla. I then returned to Melbourne and worked for the Australian Manufacturing Workers Union as a national industrial officer in the printing and packaging industry. Before I went, I really want to be a mum, I really want to have children, I really need to find a job that will allow me to have a career and be a parent. And that's when I went to become a teacher when I was 31. I studied at Melbourne University.
Right. Well, I bet the negotiating skills that you learned in the union really helped you as a teacher.
It certainly did. And I must admit, when you're standing at a gate with 300 angry iron workers, their 25 year nines complaining about their homework certainly does get put into context.
Absolutely. And so when did you decide to actually run for political office?
The decision to run and publicly announce that I wanted to stand for Parliament happened in August 2017, following the resignation of the member for Wendouree. She decided to retire. It came out of the blue. She'd only done 2 terms. She held the seat by 5%. And I had been looking at other opportunities of how I could stand, but it was really that catalyst of her retiring. But in saying that, I entered politics and joined the Labor Party back in 1995. So I was active on campus at Monash. Jeff Kennett had been elected. We had Keating in federally. He was talking about wonderful things like reconciliation and the Republic, whereas in Victoria we had nurses and teachers on the streets. So for me, there was a really clear difference between the politics of the Labor Party and the politics of the Liberal Party. And my values certainly aligned with that of the Labor Party of funding for schools, for public health. So I joined the Labor Party back then. So it was really 20 years of engagement in politics at all levels of the party, from an active branch member to policy committee member and chair, to being elected to state and national conferences. So I had been political and involved in the Labor Party for 20 years before I finally put my hand up to say I would like to be pre-selected to represent my community.
How did you find the pre-selection process?
Oh, it was bruising. It was bruising. I don't say this lightly, that it really had a profound impact on my confidence, on my questioning my abilities and capacities. Pre-selection was incredibly challenging because you are having a job interview with party members, and then you have locally, and you go through a local ballot and a local plebiscite, but that only makes up 50%. So even though I won the local vote, there is an extra layer within the Labor Party pre-selection process, which is called the Public Office Selection Committee. So after 2 weeks of winning the local ballot, there was this 50% other group, and I'd won the ballot by about 55 to 45%. So I really did need to get a significant proportion of that central panel, and it was literally knocking on doors of key unions, of key factional people, really asking for them support and really saying why I was going to make a great contribution for my community, and giving them the assurance that I would work so hard and do everything in my power not to lose the seat for Labor, because it's a lot of pressure when you stand for a Labor-held seat. We held it by 5%, but would I be able to get the support needed to keep the seat for Labor?
And tell us, Juliana, when did you hear about the Pathways to Politics program, and what made you decide to do it?
It was in early 2017, and I've shared this story before, that it just kept popping up on my Facebook feed, and I was really in a position that I was wanting to run. Like, I'd made the decision that I would like to run, and there was a potential for another seat in Ballarat that's not Wendouree because a member was retiring. And I really looked at it and I thought, what else do I need to do in terms of my skill set? What else do I need to do in order to make sure that I'm going to give myself the very best chance of being successful in pre-selection? And when this amazing course came up, I said, I really need to put my hand up and to see if I could be a part of that.
One of the things that we always think about at Pathways to Politics, as you know, is whether if we did have a critical mass of women as politicians, say 50-50, would politics look different, and would it be played out differently? Now, you're in a cabinet, or you're in a political milieu which has around 50-50 men and women, particularly in your cabinet, in the Labor cabinet at the moment in the Victorian government. How do you find that plays out?
I think it is transformative. We are the first Victorian government ever to have a 50-50 cabinet. We have extraordinary women doing extraordinary things, whether it is our health minister, our police minister, our minister for infrastructure, our minister for environment. We have these powerhouse women who are encouraging our cabinet and our government to be bold, to make the changes that our society has been calling out for decades. And we are seeing that, whether it is public health, access to IVF, we are seeing it with free kinder for 3-year-olds. We are seeing it with expanding tampons and pads and sanitary items for free to every high school. We are seeing discussions in the Parliament about people talking about issues that we have never seen on transcript before. So when you change the makeup of decision makers, you change a society.
Yeah. And let me ask you, Juliana, Do you think that the Pathways to Politics course allows you to develop the skills to collaborate with women of all political ideologies so that you can actually negotiate outcomes that are best for us as a society?
I'm a very collaborative person, so I always welcome the opportunity to engage with people of different beliefs, of different ideas, of different backgrounds, because it's something that I'm a curious person. I am a lifelong learner. I always want to be able to understand where someone else is coming from, because I'm never going to be able to convince them of my arguments if I don't understand why they've got to their position. But having looked around the parliament, there are some people who are very dogmatic. They do not want to engage with other people. And I'm saying that on all sides of politics, that they know what they believe in, they know what their values are, and they don't want to contribute. I am certainly someone who puts the hand of friendship across the chamber, that wants to support other women, that wants to build alliances, because change can be slow, and it is about allegiances and the ability to engage with a broader group that will fundamentally bring about outcomes. So it's something through my committee work. I'm on the Economy and Infrastructure Committee, that I am working with members of the Liberal Party on that committee. Steph Ryan, who is the Deputy Leaders of the Nationals, is on that committee with me. I know that by working closely with Steph and being respectful about her questions and her issues means that I'm going to learn something from Steph, and hopefully in the future we can build a trusting relationship that we might be able to deliver some strong outcomes for women in Victoria.
Yeah, well, that sounds great. And I guess that's at the root of my question. Are women more collaborative than men? And if we had equal numbers of men and women as politicians, would we start to see the way politics plays out rather than, allegiances to particular ideologies? Having that willingness to learn something from each other and come up with a solution that actually works best for our society.
Oh, look, I'm a fundamentally optimistic person, and I would like to think that is the case. But in terms of people who are willing to work together, I think a lot of that might come down to the type of person you are. But if we can create a culture within our parliaments where that is seen as something that is positive, that is worthwhile, if we can create cultural change, and we will get better outcomes. And I'm very committed to supporting any cultural change that makes our parliaments better decision makers and more reflective of our community.
Yeah, that's a great answer. Thank you. Juliana, I know that you've just started reading Julia Gillard's new book on women and leadership, which she's negotiated with the former Nigerian Finance Minister Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala. I want to ask you about media and media coverage of women, and in particular women politicians. What are your observations about that? And have you had any direct experience of, let's say, sexist media coverage?
Julia Gillard, it is uncontestable, the treatment she received by our media was appalling. She was put under scrutiny like no other. She, like Hillary Clinton, was so capable and so talented and so experienced and so intelligent, yet the media were determined to undermine her capacity to lead at every single turn. I think Julia has made it easier for women like me who are coming up the ranks of parliamentary representation. I think over the last 7 years there's been a lot of reflection by women and also women in the media, certainly academics, about the treatment of Julia Gillard. And I think if we were then to compare and contrast with how Jacinda Ardern has been treated, she has had a very different treatment by the media. I can't talk about the New Zealand media, but I can talk about how the Australian media has portrayed her as there hasn't been undermining because she gave birth in office. There has not been undermining that her partner, Julia Gillard, was highly criticised for not being married. I'm not sure whether, I know Jacinda was engaged. I don't even know if she's got married yet or not. But Jacinda wasn't married, but it didn't seem to be the same level of interest in that relationship. So I think Julia Gillard certainly has been a trailblazer for all of us, but I certainly think that there is an undercurrent, and just look at the way that Minister Makakos is being treated at the moment by the Herald Sun, and the way that they are questioning and undermining her capacity. She is a very, very hardworking and diligent minister, and the fact that headlines at the Herald Sun are running, I question whether the same would be run about a man.
I don't read the Herald Sun, so can you give me an example of the sort of headlines that are being run?
I refuse to subscribe to them, but I do try and keep an eye over the Herald Sun. But there have been some very strong headlines. I can certainly forward them on to you, questioning her competence, questioning her ability, calling on her to resign, and it is very harsh treatment.
Yeah. And what about sexism more generally? I mean, you know, at the moment there are accusations flying, I guess, in every industry, in every profession around sexual harassment and sexist behaviour. How do you think that's dealt with in politics?
I can speak from the Victorian perspective, and it's similar to that other answer of the culture that we are creating. The Leader of the House is Jacinda Allen. She has been a Member of Parliament. She like Minister Makakos, are the longest serving women Labor members of Parliament. They've both been in the Parliament for 21 years. Jacinda's leadership as Leader of the House in the Legislative Assembly sets a very strong tone about capable, strong women. We see that again with Minister Neville when she gets up and she is reporting on the bushfires or her leadership regarding the tragic death of the police officers on the Eastern Freeway. These women are showing Victorians and Australians they are capable, they are strong, and that they should be respected for the role that they are doing. So from the Victorian perspective, I can certainly say with these strong women leaders within the Victorian government, I certainly have not experienced any sexism. But when you look at what's happening within the High Court, within the legal system, within other parliaments around the world, not everyone is as fortunate as me. But what this tells us is that by putting capable and strong women into positions of authority, you do change culture.
That's right, because you have the role models and you create a new normal. So
yes.
Therefore you create a new behaviour.
Yes.
Juliana, how are you coping with homeschooling? And I guess in Ballarat you're in stage 3 lockdown?
Yes, we are. I know for all parents it is really, really challenging that when you work full time and that you have younger children at home, particularly. I have a daughter in grade 4 and a daughter in grade 6, and whilst they are very good kids, as a former teacher, I know they need structure, they need feedback, they need support, they need instruction. And I think a lot of parents, from friends that I've spoken to and members of my community, feel that there's a great burden that not only are we trying to keep our own mental health intact and support our families, that our children somewhat may fall behind if we don't be super mums. But we don't need to be super mums. We just need to take a breath, make sure that we support our kids, we love our kids. The kids are going to be okay. We've seen the research from Christchurch after the earthquake that happened there, that the children's results across schools in New Zealand actually improved the year of the earthquake when they missed 10 weeks of school. So I am confident that with the amazing work being done by our teachers in our schools, our kids are going to be okay, and we should not be giving ourselves a hard time, just doing the best we can.
Couldn't agree with you more. I think that if you read a lovely book to your child and you bake a cake together and you do the measure, let them do the measuring out, that covers all the maths and English that they need probably for the next few weeks.
Absolutely. We did chemistry while we made pancakes yesterday. So melting the butter and turning up the heat. So a bit of chemistry and a bit of outdoor ed when we're going out for a walk with the dog. There's plenty of ways that our kids can learn, and they will.
Yeah, absolutely. Juliana, do you want to, before we go, share with us anything else that you might be reading at the moment, if you've got a minute to read?
Yeah, look, I did. It was my birthday last week, and my daughters bought me the Jacinda Ardern This Is What I Know, which is a beautiful series that's been put out by the Nelson Mandela Foundation, and it was sold at Target locally. And it's a number of Jacinda's speeches, one to the United Nations and another one on climate change to the New Zealand Parliament. But just a series of questions about what does leadership look like. Talk to us about the dreadful terrorist attack on the Muslim community in New Zealand and everything like that. So I was delighted just to read that, and my big fan moment was I Instagrammed that I was reading it and Jacinda liked it. So that was one degree of separation from Jacinda. She saw that I was enjoying her book and she liked my Instagram, so that was pretty special.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for sharing that with us, and thank you so much for spending time with us today. And good luck with the rest of the lockdown. I'm sure your children will do brilliantly in their final year exams.
Terrific, and thank you so much for this opportunity, Carol.